I recently had to experience something that no father, no parent should ever go through. Two police officers pulled my little daughter, Layla, out of her car during a routine stop, slammed her face into the pavement, and punched her while she screamed for help. They said she ran a red light. She didn't. They said she resisted. She didn't. And while she cried, cuffed and bleeding, they laughed. When I got to the scene, her eye was swollen shut, blood down her cheek, her voice barely a whisper when she said, "They kept hitting me, Daddy," and they laughed. I tried to go through the system, file a report, see the body cam. They told me the footage malfunctioned. Internal Affairs said it was necessary force. No one would give me answers because they thought I was just another broken father too scared to fight back. What they didn't know, what no one at that precinct realized, was that I'm a retired Navy SEAL, and I don't ask for justice, I deliver it, and they touched the wrong girl. But let's start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where in the world you're listening from today. The phone rang at 11:42 p.m. That time is burned into my memory like a brand. I'd been dozing in my recliner, some basketball game flickering on the TV. My first thought was that it was a wrong number. My second was that it was work, except I didn't have work anymore, not since retiring from the teams 3 years ago. By the third ring, a cold feeling had settled in my gut. I grabbed my cell from the coffee table. Unknown number. In my 20 years as a SEAL, unknown numbers never brought good news. "Hello?" My voice came out gravel rough from sleep. "Is this Mr. James Taylor?" A woman's voice, professional but with an undercurrent of something that made my spine straighten. Speaking. "Mr. Taylor, this is Officer Mendez with the Oakwood Police Department. There's been an incident involving your daughter, Layla." The world stopped. Just stopped. Every combat mission, every firefight I'd ever been in, nothing compared to those words. My daughter. My girl. What happened? I was already on my feet, scanning the room for my keys. "Is she—" I couldn't finish the question. "Sir, your daughter was involved in a traffic stop that escalated. She's been injured and is receiving medical attention. We need you to—" "Where is she?" My voice had gone flat, the way it did before operations. That dangerous calm that my teammates used to say was scarier than shouting. "EMTs are on scene at the corner of Maple and 43rd. They'll be transporting her to Memorial Hospital shortly." I didn't bother with goodbye, didn't bother with shoes, just grabbed my keys and ran. The drive was a blur. Red lights meant nothing. Stop signs were suggestions. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought it might snap. My mind cycled through possibilities. Car accident, DUI, some teenage mistake. But something in that officer's voice told me this was different. Layla was a good kid, smart, cautious. She'd never been in trouble a day in her life. I made the 20-minute drive and ate. The scene hit me like a physical blow. Police cruisers, lights spinning silent red and blue across the night. Yellow tape already up. A small crowd of onlookers held back by uniforms. And there, in the center of it all, an ambulance with its back doors open. I abandoned my car half on the sidewalk and ran. "That's my daughter," I shouted as a young officer tried to intercept me. "My daughter's in there." Something in my face must have convinced him. He stepped aside, speaking into his radio. I didn't care. I just ran. The EMTs were loading her in when I reached them. And then I saw her face. My beautiful girl. My Layla. Her right eye was swollen nearly shut, the skin around it already darkening to a deep purple. Blood had dried at the corner of her split lip. There was a gash across her left cheekbone that someone had hastily bandaged. Her braids, the ones she'd spent hours getting done just last weekend, were partially undone, some hanging loose around her face. "Layla," I whispered, my voice breaking, "baby girl." Her eyes fluttered open, the one that could, and found mine. Relief washed over her battered face. "Daddy," she said, and the word came out garbled through her swollen lip. I climbed into the ambulance, ignoring protest from someone behind me. One of the EMTs, a woman with kind eyes, nodded and made room. I took Layla's hand. It was cold, so cold. and I wrapped both of mine around it. "I'm here now," I told her. "I'm here. You're safe." Her fingers tightened around mine with surprising strength. "They stopped me," she whispered. "Said I ran a light." "I didn't, Daddy. I swear I didn't." "Shh, I know, I believe you." I stroked her hair back from her forehead, careful to avoid the bruises. "Don't talk now, we'll sort it out later." But she shook her head, wincing at the movement. "They pulled me out of the car," she continued, her voice so low I had to lean in to hear it. "3 of them. They kept saying I was resisting. I wasn't. I did everything they said." Rage began to build in my chest, a physical pressure that made it hard to breathe. I forced it down. Not now. She needed me calm. One of them twisted my arm behind my back. "So hard, Daddy. I thought it would break." A tear slid from the corner of her good eye. I screamed, and that made them mad. The big one hit me first, then the others. The EMT was checking Layla's vitals, her face carefully neutral, but I could see the tightness around her mouth. She'd heard this before. "Did anyone help you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The neighborhood where they'd stopped her wasn't known for people rushing to intervene in police business. Layla's face crumpled. "They were laughing, Daddy," she whispered. "When they hit me, they were laughing." Something inside me shifted then. Something fundamental. The rage I'd been holding back transformed into something colder, harder, more focused. I'd felt it before, in faraway places where the rules of civilization didn't apply. Never thought I'd feel it here in my own city, holding my daughter's broken hand. They laughed while they hurt my child. The ambulance doors closed. The siren wailed to life as we pulled away from the scene. But in my head, I heard a different sound. A sound I hadn't heard since my last deployment. The steady, relentless beat of war drums. I looked down at Layla, her brave eyes meeting mine despite the pain, and I made a silent promise. The men who did this would pay, not today, not tomorrow, but they would pay. "I'm not leaving you," I told her as the ambulance raced through the night. "Not for a second." She nodded slightly and her eyes drifted closed, exhaustion and trauma pulling her under. I sat in the swaying ambulance, holding my daughter's hand, listening to those drums. The emergency room was chaos, a symphony of beeping machines, hushed voices, and the occasional cry of pain. But I barely registered any of it. My entire world had narrowed to the curtained examination bay where Layla lay. A young doctor with tired eyes examined her with gentle hands. She introduced herself as Dr. Patel and spoke to Layla directly, explaining each step before she took it. I appreciated that. Layla needed to feel some control right now. "I'm going to document all your injuries," Dr. Patel told her. "Is that okay?" Layla nodded, her good eye finding mine. I squeezed her hand. "Your father can stay if you want," Dr. Patel added. "Please," Layla whispered. So I stood there, forcing myself to watch as Dr. Patel photographed each bruise, each abrasion, each swollen patch of skin. My daughter's body had become evidence, and something primal in me wanted to tear the camera away, to shield her from this further violation. But I knew better. We needed this. "Orbital contusion," Dr. Patel dictated as she examined Layla's swollen eye. "Possible fracture of the zygomatic arch." She moved down. "Split lip requiring 3 sutures. Contusions on both cheeks. Abrasions consistent with impact against rough surface, possibly concrete." My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Dr. Patel continued her inventory, lifting Layla's hospital gown with her permission to reveal dark bruises blooming across her ribs. Multiple contusions to the torso. 2 ribs showing significant bruising. We'll need x-rays to confirm if there are fractures. When she examined Layla's wrists and found the deep purple bands circling them, I had to turn away for a moment. "Ligature marks consistent with restraints applied with excessive force," Dr. Patel said quietly. Layla's voice was small. The handcuffs, they kept tightening them. I swallowed hard and turned back, taking her hand again. Dr. Patel's eyes met mine briefly. There was anger there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "I'm documenting everything," she said, her words carrying a weight beyond their simple meaning. Everything. After the examination, after the x-rays confirmed 2 cracked ribs, after they'd given Layla something for the pain that finally let her sleep, Dr. Patel found me in the hallway. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I've filed the medical report. It's comprehensive." "Thank you," I said. She hesitated, then handed me a business card. "This attorney specializes in police misconduct cases. She's good." I pocketed the card. "What about the body cam footage?" "You'll need to request that from the precinct," she said. "Do it first thing tomorrow. Don't give them time to lose it." I nodded. We both knew what lose it meant. "Your daughter is strong," Dr. Patel added. "But what happened to her was wrong. Medically, legally, morally wrong." "I know," I said. Her eyes searched mine. "Just be careful how you handle this." I gave her my best reassuring smile, the one I'd perfected over years of parent-teacher conferences. "I always am, doctor." The next morning, I was at the precinct before they opened. Layla was stable, sedated, and her aunt, my late wife's sister, was sitting with her. I'd kissed Layla's forehead, promised I'd be back soon, and left with a single purpose. The desk sergeant looked up with bored eyes when I approached. "I need to file a formal complaint and request body camera footage," I said, keeping my voice steady, professional. "My daughter was assaulted during a traffic stop last night." His expression didn't change. "Fill this out." He slid a form across the counter. I completed it meticulously, making sure every detail was correct. When I handed it back, he barely glanced at it before dropping it into a tray. "Someone will contact you," he said. "When?" I asked. He shrugged. "When they get to it." "And the body cam footage?" "You'll need to talk to Internal Affairs about that, 3rd floor." I took the elevator up, my reflection in the polished metal doors showing a man I barely recognized. I'd slept in my clothes. My eyes were red-rimmed, but my posture was military straight, my movements controlled. Some habits never die. The Internal Affairs office was small and windowless. A detective with thinning hair and a coffee stain on his tie introduced himself as Keller. "I understand you want to see body cam footage from last night," he said after I explained why I was there. "Yes, 3 officers were involved in my daughter's arrest. I want all their footage." Keller tapped at his computer, frowning slightly. "That's strange. Seems there was a malfunction with the cameras." "All 3? I kept my voice neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Technical issues happen," he said, not meeting my eyes, especially during physical altercations. "My daughter wasn't in a physical altercation. She was beaten while handcuffed." Keller's expression hardened. "According to the officer's report, your daughter resisted arrest and became combative. They used necessary force to subdue her." "That's a lie." The words came out sharper than I intended. "Mr. Carter," Keller said, leaning forward, "I understand you're upset, but I should inform you that this incident has already been reviewed by Internal Affairs this morning. The officer's actions have been deemed appropriate given the circumstances." "Already reviewed?" I echoed. "It happened last night. You couldn't possibly have conducted a proper investigation." Keller spread his hands. "The officers filed their reports immediately. Their supervisor reviewed the situation. It's open and shut." "My daughter has 2 cracked ribs," I said, my voice dropping dangerously low. "A possible orbital fracture. She's 17 years old and weighs 120 pounds. How is that necessary force?" "I'm sorry about your daughter's injuries, but I want the names of the officers involved." Keller shook his head. "I can't release that information." "Then I want to speak to your superior." "He's not available." Every door slammed in my face, every avenue blocked. I stood up slowly, deliberately. "This isn't over," I said. Keller looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like wariness in his eyes. "Good. He should be wary. For your daughter's sake," he said quietly. "I suggest you let it go." As I turned to leave, I caught sight of another detective watching from across the room. Young guy, crew cut, with a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. Instead, his smirk widened into something ugly. I walked out of the building, down the concrete steps, and into the cool morning air. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with the effort of restraint. I took one deep breath, then another, letting the oxygen flow through me, clearing my mind. Then I turned and looked back at the precinct building, all glass and steel and supposed justice. "You picked the wrong girl," I said under my breath, "and the wrong father." I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Layla's battered face, heard her whisper, "They were laughing, Dad." By dawn, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a legal pad, a pot of black coffee, and the cold, focused clarity that used to settle over me before missions. The kind of clarity that separates the living from the dead. I wrote down everything I knew. 3 cops beat my daughter during a routine traffic stop. No body cam footage available. Internal Affairs already closed the case, precinct protecting their own. Then I wrote what I needed: names of the officers, evidence of what they did, leverage. I tapped my pen against the paper, thinking. In the military, we had a saying, intelligence drives operations. Right now, I had almost none. But I knew one critical fact from my years dealing with police departments on security contracts. Most precincts only keep body cam footage for 30 days unless it's flagged for an investigation. The incident had happened 2 nights ago. That gave me 28 days, maximum. Number I couldn't risk waiting that long. What if their policy was different? What if they already started erasing evidence? 7 days. I'd give myself 7 days to get what I needed before the footage might disappear forever. The countdown had started. I showered, shaved, and dressed in clean clothes. Then I called the one person I knew could help me breach their digital fortress. "Theo, it's me. We need to talk." "Carter?" His voice was rough with sleep. "Man, it's been, 3 years? I need your help. It's important." A pause. "How important?" Layla. That was all I needed to say. Theo had been at her 5th birthday party, had sent her graduation gifts, had stood beside me at her mother's funeral. Where and when? "Diner on Lexington, the one with the good pancakes, 1 hour. I'll be there." I arrived early, chose a corner booth with a view of both entrances, and ordered coffee. Old habits. Theo showed up right on time, wearing a faded hoodie despite the heat, his beard scragglier than I remembered, his eyes, though, still sharp as broken glass. He slid into the booth across from me. "You look like shit, brother." "Feel worse." The waitress came over. Theo ordered pancakes and coffee. I wasn't hungry. "So," he said when she left, "what happened to Layla?" I told him everything, keeping my voice low, steady, professional. But Theo knew me too well. He could see the rage simmering beneath the surface. "Jesus," he whispered when I finished. "Those bastards." "I need to get into their system," I said. "Find the footage before it disappears." Theo leaned back, his eyes calculating. "Police networks are tough. Not impossible, but tough. They'll have timestamps, officer ID codes, GPS coordinates. If the footage exists, it'll be there." "Can you do it?" "Maybe." He rubbed his beard. "But we'd need to be careful. This isn't some third world dictatorship where we can just disappear afterward. This is home. I know the risks." "Do you?" His voice sharpened. "Because I'm not sure you're thinking clearly right now, Carter. I've seen that look before. Right before you did something that got you a medal or almost got you killed." I leaned forward. "They hurt my daughter, Theo. My little girl. And they're laughing about it. The system is protecting them." "And what exactly are you planning to do once you have their names, their footage?" I didn't answer immediately. I wasn't entirely sure myself. Part of me, a dark, primal part, wanted blood. But another part, the strategist, knew better. "Exposure," I finally said. "Evidence that can't be buried. Justice." Theo studied me, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but we do this my way. Smart, surgical, No traces. Just like old times. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Operation codes? It was an old habit from our SEAL days. Every mission had a code name, sometimes official, sometimes just between us. Daylight, I said, because that's what we're bringing to this. Light. Timeline? 7 days, that's our window before the footage might be gone forever. Theo whistled low. Tight. Can you do it? He took a sip of his coffee, thinking. I'll need equipment, secure connections, a place to work that's not your house or mine. I've got a storage unit, climate-controlled, private. That works, I'll need access to their network, might have to go physical, plant something on site. The waitress brought his pancakes. We paused, waited until she was gone. How's your daughter now? He asked, pouring syrup methodically over his stack. Still in the hospital. Observation for the concussion. They're releasing her tomorrow. She know what you're planning? I shook my head. And she won't. This isn't her burden. It's going to be dangerous, Carter. Theo cut into his pancakes. These guys have badges, guns, and the system backing them. We'll be committing multiple felonies just accessing their network. I know. And if we get caught, there's no embassy to call. No extraction team. I know that too. Theo chewed thoughtfully, then swallowed. Remember Kandahar? That time we had to get those hostages out with no backup? I nodded. One of our hairiest missions. 3 hostages, dozen-plus tangos, and a sandstorm that grounded our air support. Everyone said it couldn't be done. Theo smiled slightly. But we did it anyway. Because we had no choice, I said. And now we have no choice again. Theo pushed his plate aside, pulled a small notebook from his pocket, and began writing. I'll need about 5,000 for equipment. Nothing traceable. Not a problem. And Carter? He looked up, his expression serious. 7 days is ambitious. We might need more time. We don't have it. Day 8, that footage could be gone forever. Then we better not waste time. He tore the page from his notebook and slid it across to me. A list of equipment, written in the shorthand we'd developed years ago. I'll start today. Call you tonight with progress. As we left the diner, Theo clasped my shoulder. We're going to find out who did this, brother. And they're going to pay. For the first time since seeing Layla in that ambulance, I felt something other than rage. Something like hope. The clock was ticking. 7 days to infiltrate a police precinct's secure network and extract evidence before it vanished forever. The mission had begun. After leaving Theo, I drove to Miss Shirley's East Side bungalow. I hadn't seen her since Marissa's funeral 3 years ago. My late wife and Shirley had been best friends, sisters in all but blood. When cancer took Marissa, Shirley supported both Layla and me, but eventually, we'd all retreated into separate grief. Now I needed her help. Her yellow house looked unchanged, pristine flower beds, wind chimes, and that blessed wreath Marissa had given her. I knocked 3 times, our signal. The door opened to reveal Miss Shirley, silver-streaked hair in a neat bun, her sharp eyes widening as she recognized me. Carter Williams, 3 years of silence and you show up looking hunted. May I come in? It's important. After studying me, she opened the door wider. This better be good. Inside smelled of lemon polish and baking. Her house remained a time capsule, doilies, family photos, and that grandfather clock Marissa had coveted. Kitchen, she ordered, leading the way. Whatever this is, we're discussing it over food. She pulled out a peach cobbler and commanded, Talk. It's about Layla. Her spatula froze. What happened? I explained everything. The traffic stop, beating, hospital, and police stonewalling. Shirley listened silently, her expression hardening. When I finished, she set down her spatula deliberately. Those bastards. And the precincts covering it up? Complete shutdown, no footage, nothing. Which officers? That's partly why I'm here. I only have badge numbers from Layla's memory. Her eyes narrowed. You're planning something not exactly by the book. The book failed my daughter. She nodded, retrieved a notepad, and wrote down the numbers I recited. I retired 5 years ago, but I still know people. What exactly are you trying to do? I need to identify these officers, learn their patterns, and access the precinct's system to recover the body cam footage. That's ambitious. I have technical help. I need your insider knowledge. She sighed. Marissa would hate me helping you do something foolish. Marissa would have torn that precinct apart herself. She smiled slightly. You're right. She retrieved an accordion file. I kept some things when I retired. Insurance. For hours we examined papers. Shirley translated police jargon, explained shifts, mapped the precinct, and made discreet calls to former colleagues. By evening I had notes, diagrams, and lists of personnel with Shirley's assessments of who was straight, bent, or questionable. Take this too, she added, handing me a flash drive of precinct codes and procedures. These officers are dangerous men with dangerous friends, she warned. They're not the only ones. Back home, I arranged everything. A pattern emerged. 3 officers repeatedly involved in excessive force incidents. Always cleared. Always with evidence missing. This wasn't just about Layla. This was systematic. Theo texted, "Equipment secured. Ready when you are." I replied, "Tomorrow. 800. Bring more storage." This just got bigger. I met Theo at 800 sharp in the abandoned office space he'd borrowed for our operation. The building was scheduled for renovation next month, but for now, it was just empty enough to be invisible while maintaining power and internet access. Perfect for what we needed. Nice setup, I said, surveying the room. Theo had transformed the dusty space into a mobile command center. 3 monitors glowed on a makeshift desk. Cables snaked across the floor to a server stack humming in the corner. The windows were covered with blackout material, and a small portable AC unit fought against the heat generated by the equipment. Got everything we need, Theo replied, not looking up from his keyboard. And then some, like you asked. I set down the coffee carrier and breakfast sandwiches I'd brought. Theo grabbed his coffee without pausing his typing. "Miss Shirley came through?" he asked. "Beyond expectations. We've got shift schedules, access protocols, and a pretty good map of who's who in the precinct." "Good, because I've got something too." He spun in his chair to face me. "Remember that exploit I mentioned? The one that might get us into their system? Did it work?" His grin was answer enough. "They're running an outdated server with minimal security patches. Might as well have left the front door open with a welcome mat." "What did you find?" "That's why I wanted you here." His expression sobered. It's not good, man." He turned back to his monitors and pulled up a directory structure. "This is their evidence server. Body cam footage, dash cams, interview recordings, everything's here." "The footage from Layla's stop?" "Yeah, but that's just the beginning." He clicked through several folders. "These are organized by badge number and date. I started with the officers from Layla's incident and went backward through their files." He opened a video file. Dashcam footage showed a car being pulled over, a young black man behind the wheel. The timestamp showed it was from 3 months ago. "Watch this," Theo said quietly. The traffic stop started routinely enough, but quickly escalated. The officers became aggressive without provocation. When the driver asked why he was being detained, one officer yanked him from the car. The camera angle shifted, partially obscuring what happened next, but I could see enough. The officers taking turns throwing punches while the young man was on the ground. "That camera angle change isn't accidental," Theo explained. "The file's been edited, but they did a sloppy job, left artifacts in the code." My jaw tightened. "Show me more." For the next hour, Theo pulled up file after file. Each one showed the same 2 officers, Jenkins and Morales, conducting stops that escalated to violence. Always targeting young people of color. Always finding ways to justify the escalation afterward. "There's a pattern to when they do this," Theo said, pulling up a calendar view he'd created. "Late shifts, low traffic areas, times when backup is typically tied up elsewhere." But it was what he showed me next that made my blood run cold. "I found this folder buried deep in the server. It's not part of the standard file structure." He clicked on a directory labeled simply Insurance. Inside were dozens of photos, teenagers, young adults, all looking terrified. Some were bloodied, bruised. Others were photographed next to what appeared to be planted drugs or weapons. "These are blackmail files," Theo said grimly. "They're using these to keep victims quiet." I leaned closer, scrolling through the images one by one. My fists clenched involuntarily as each new face appeared on screen. Young people who'd been terrorized into silence. Then Theo opened a text file containing what appeared to be a ledger. "It's not just about power," he said. "It's about money. They're running an extortion ring. These kids, their families, they're paying to keep these photos private, to avoid drug charges." I stood up and paced the room, trying to contain the fury building inside me. This wasn't just about Layla anymore. This was systematic predation. "How many?" I asked. "I've identified 43 victims over the past 18 months, and those are just the ones they documented." Theo pulled up another file, a spreadsheet tracking payments. "They've collected over $200,000, cash drops mostly, some digital payments through gaming accounts and crypto wallets to hide the trail. Who else is involved? At least 4 other officers that I can identify, and someone higher up has to be protecting them." He pointed to several incident reports. "These complaints were filed and then buried. Someone with authority is making sure these never see daylight." I stared at the monitors, taking it all in. The scope was far larger than I'd imagined. This wasn't just a few bad cops taking advantage of their position. This was an organized criminal operation wearing badges. "What about Layla's footage?" I finally asked. Theo's expression darkened. "They tried to delete it, but I recovered it from the backup server." He hesitated before playing the file. "Carter, it's rough. Play it." The footage showed exactly what Layla had described. A routine stop escalating without reason, the officers taunting her, the first blow coming when she reached for her registration. Then more, their laughter as she cried out. I watched without blinking, memorizing every detail, every word, every face. The muscles in my jaw worked silently. When it ended, I stood perfectly still for several long moments. "Download everything," I said finally. "Every file, every photo, every report. Make multiple copies." "Already on it," Theo replied. "What's the play here? We taking this to the FBI, State Attorney General?" I shook my head slowly. "Not yet. These men have been protected by the system for too long. If we go official now, evidence will disappear, witnesses will be pressured, and they'll walk away clean." I turned to face him. "Layla wasn't the first," I said, my voice low and controlled. "But I swear to you, she will be the last." Theo studied my face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time these predators learned what it feels like to be hunted." I tapped one of the screens showing Jenkins and Morales. "They've been operating in the shadows, using fear to control their victims. Let's see how they handle being afraid themselves." I wrapped up the strategy session with Theo just after midnight. We'd mapped out our next moves, how we'd gather more evidence, identify all the players in this corruption ring, and build an airtight case that couldn't be buried or explained away. But first we needed to ensure Layla's safety. Those photos of other victims haunted me. "You should get some rest," Theo said, packing up his laptop. "You look like hell." "I'll sleep when this is over," I replied, walking him to the door. After Theo left, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the wall covered in photos, notes, and timelines. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I needed fresh air. I grabbed my keys and headed to the garage. Maybe I'd take a quick drive, clear my head. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. The garage light flickered as I reached for the switch. That was odd. I'd just replaced that bulb last week. The shadows seemed deeper than usual, the corners darker. My instincts flared a second too late. A figure lunged from behind my SUV, driving a shoulder into my midsection. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs as I stumbled backward. Training kicked in. I twisted, absorbing the momentum, and managed to stay on my feet. A second attacker emerged from my blind spot, swinging something heavy. I barely ducked the blow, feeling it whistle past my ear. The garage light caught their faces, or would have, if they weren't wearing black ski masks. "You should have minded your business," the first one growled. I didn't waste breath responding. These weren't random thugs, they'd been waiting for me. They knew who I was. That meant they were connected to Jenkins and Morales. I drove my fist into the nearest attacker's solar plexus, feeling the satisfying impact as he doubled over. But the second man caught me with a blow to the kidney that sent pain shooting through my side. "We can do this all night," the second man said, circling me. His voice was calm, professional. These weren't street punks, they moved with the confidence of trained fighters. I backed up, trying to create space, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a wrench from my workbench. 2 against 1, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Not very sporting. "This isn't a game," the first man said, recovering from my blow. They coordinated their attack with practiced efficiency, one coming high while the other went low. I managed to catch the first with the wrench across his forearm, heard a satisfying crack and a howl of pain. But the second tackled me at the knees. I went down hard, my head bouncing off the concrete floor. Stars exploded behind my eyes as the wrench clattered away. A boot connected with my ribs. Once, twice. I curled inward, protecting my vital organs the way I'd been trained. Another kick caught me in the back. "Not so tough now, are you?" one of them taunted. I grabbed for his ankle on the next kick, yanking hard. He toppled backward, crashing into my tool cabinet. Tools rained down with a metallic clatter. But his partner was on me instantly, driving a knee into my back and wrenching my arm up between my shoulder blades. The pain was blinding. "Listen carefully," he hissed in my ear, his breath hot against my skin. "This is your only warning. Tell your girl to keep quiet. Or next time, it's her." Those words cut through the pain like a knife. They knew about Layla. They knew she was the key witness, and they knew how to find her. "We're watching you," the other man said, limping over. He was cradling his arm, the one I'd struck with the wrench. Every move, every call, every visitor. The knee dug deeper into my spine. "The smart play is to forget what happened. Take your daughter and leave town. Start fresh somewhere else." "Or don't," said the other. "Makes no difference to us. We get paid either way." The pressure on my back suddenly released. I rolled over, gasping in time to see them backing toward the garage door. "Remember," the one with the injured arm said, pointing at me. "Next time it's her." They slipped out into the darkness, leaving me lying on the cold concrete floor. For several minutes I couldn't move. My ribs screamed in protest with each breath. Blood trickled from a cut above my eye, and my back felt like it had been trampled by horses. But none of that mattered. They know where Layla is. That thought drowned out everything else. The pain, the ringing in my ears, even my own ragged breathing. These men knew where my daughter was staying. The safe house wasn't safe anymore. Using the workbench for support, I pulled myself to my feet. The room tilted and spun. Possible concussion. Definitely bruised ribs, maybe cracked. But I'd survived worse in my SEAL days. I staggered back into the house, leaving a trail of blood droplets on the tile floor. My phone was on the kitchen counter. I needed to warn Layla, to move her somewhere else. Somewhere truly safe. As I reached for my phone, another thought hit me with crushing clarity. This wasn't just about silencing a witness anymore. This was about making sure I understood the stakes. They could have killed me tonight. They chose not to. They wanted me afraid, wanted me to back off. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I'd spent my entire military career facing down threats greater than these thugs. I'd survived firefights where the odds were far worse than 2-1. But this was different. This wasn't about me. This was about Layla. I dialed Miss Shirley with shaking fingers. "They know," I said when she answered. "They know where she is." I woke before dawn, my body a catalog of pain. Each breath sent fire through my ribs. My left eye had swollen nearly shut. The mirror showed a man I barely recognized. Purple bruises blooming across my face. Dried blood crusted at my hairline. Good. I could use this. I called Shirley first thing. my voice tight with pain that wasn't entirely feigned. "I need to move Layla," I said without preamble. "They found me last night." "Jesus Christ," Shirley breathed. "How bad?" "Bad enough to know they're serious." I winced as I shifted positions. "They said they're watching me. Watching her." "Bring her here," Shirley said immediately. "My building has security cameras and a doorman who owes me favors. Plus, I'm on the 11th floor." "You sure? This puts you in their crosshairs, too." Shirley's voice hardened. "That girl is as good as my granddaughter, and nobody, I mean nobody, threatens my family." 40 minutes later, I pulled up to the safe house where Layla had been staying. The curtains twitched as I approached. Smart girl. She was watching for trouble. When she opened the door, her eyes widened at the sight of my battered face. "Dad? What happened?" Her voice cracked with fear. "Pack your things," I said, stepping inside. "We're moving you somewhere safer." Her hands trembled as she threw clothes into a duffel bag. "They found you, didn't they?" "The cops?" I nodded, helping her gather her medications. Not the cops themselves. Hired muscle. But yeah, they made their point. "This is all my fault," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I stopped what I was doing and took her by the shoulders, careful not to grip too tightly. The bruises from her own assault were still visible beneath her makeup. "Listen to me, Layla. None of this, not 1 second of it, is your fault. You did nothing wrong. They did. And they're going to pay for it." She nodded, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. "Where are we going?" she asked as we loaded her things into the car. "Miss Shirley's place. She's got good security and she'll look after you While you what, Dad?" Her voice had an edge to it now. I chose my words carefully. "While I make sure these people can't hurt anyone else?" The drive to Shirley's was tense. I checked the rearview mirror constantly, taking 3 unnecessary turns to make sure we weren't being followed. Paranoia? Maybe. But paranoia keeps you alive. Shirley was waiting at the entrance to her building, arms crossed, looking like a sentinel. The doorman, a burly guy with a salt and pepper beard, nodded respectfully as we approached. "Miss Shirley filled me in," he said quietly. "Nobody gets upstairs without me calling first." "Appreciate it," I replied, shaking his hand. Upstairs, Shirley's apartment was warm and smelled like cinnamon. She'd already made up the guest room for Layla, complete with fresh towels and a vase of daisies, Layla's favorite. "You look like hell warmed over," Shirley told me bluntly as she examined my face. "Sit down before you fall down." I didn't argue. My body felt like it was held together with rusty wire and spite. "So what's the plan?" Shirley asked once Layla was settled in the guest room. "I need to go dark," I explained. "Make them think they won, that I'm broken." Shirley nodded slowly. The old playing possum trick. "Exactly. If they think I've given up, they'll get sloppy, drop their guard. And meanwhile I hunt." After finishing my coffee, I outlined what needed to happen next. Shirley would stay with Layla. I would create a diversion, make it look like I'd had a complete breakdown. Before leaving, I went to say goodbye to Layla. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. "I'll be back soon," I promised. "Be careful," she whispered. "I can't lose you too." The words hit me like a physical blow. After her mother died, I'd promised Layla I'd always be there. Now I was walking into danger deliberately. "You won't lose me," I said, hugging her gently. "But I need to do this. For you. For all the other kids they've hurt." She nodded against my shoulder. "I know, just come back, okay? Count on it." I left Shirley's building through the service entrance, hat pulled low over my face. Phase 1 of my plan was about to begin. First stop, my workplace. I called my boss from the parking lot, voice deliberately unsteady. I can't come in," I said, letting my voice crack. "My daughter. They hurt her, and now they came for me. I need some time." "Take whatever you need," my boss said, concern evident in his voice. "Do you need help? Should I call someone?" "No," I said too quickly. I need to be alone." Figure things out. Next, I drove home and made a show of packing essentials into my truck. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as I loaded boxes, my movements erratic, my face still bloody and bruised. Let them talk. Let words spread. I deleted all my social media accounts from my phone, turned off location services, withdrew cash from 3 different ATMs. Then I drove to the predetermined meeting spot where Theo was waiting. He whistled low when he saw my face. "Damn, brother, they did a number on you." "Nothing broken," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "You got what I need?" Theo nodded, opening the trunk of his car. Inside was a black duffel bag filled with equipment that would make any surveillance expert drool. Wireless microphones with 50-yard range, button cameras with night vision, directional microphone that can pick up conversations through windows, GPS trackers small enough to hide under a car bumper. He pointed to each item as he spoke. And this beauty, a scanner that can intercept police radio even when they're using encrypted channels. "You're a miracle worker," I said, examining the gear. "Just like old times," Theo replied with a grim smile. "Except the bad guys are wearing badges." We spent the next hour going over the equipment, making sure I knew how to use everything. Then Theo handed me a burner phone. "Only call me on this, I've got a similar one, both untraceable." I nodded, pocketing the phone. "Where will you stay?" he asked. "Better you don't know," I replied. "But I'll be watching them, learning their patterns, finding their weak spots." Theo clasped my shoulder. "Watch your 6, brother. Always do." As dusk fell, I drove to an extended stay motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash for a week, and gave a false name. The room was basic but clean. More importantly, it was anonymous. I unloaded my gear, taped a map to the wall, and began plotting surveillance points around the precinct and the officers' homes. For the next 48 hours, I would become a ghost, watching, listening, gathering intelligence. The hunt had begun. I spent the next day and a half mapping their routines. Officer Carlson lived in a small ranch house on the east side, drove a black Dodge Charger, and spent his off hours at a bar called the Blue Line. Officer Mendez had a 2-story in the suburbs, a wife who left for work at 7:15 every morning, and a weakness for sports betting. But there was a third officer who kept appearing in the files Theo had uncovered, Ramirez. Unlike the others, he seemed peripheral, present but not active. In several of the dashcam videos, he stood in the background, eyes averted while Carlson and Mendez did their dirty work. "What's his story?" I'd asked Shirley during one of our brief encrypted calls. "Ramirez." She'd paused. "Younger guy, quiet. Used to partner with Mendez before requesting a transfer last year. Never heard anything bad about him specifically." That caught my attention. A transfer request could mean many things, but combined with his body language in those videos, maybe he had a conscience. I decided to make contact. Ramirez lived in a modest apartment complex across town. I watched him for a full day, noted how he walked with his shoulders hunched, how he checked his mirrors constantly while driving, how he jumped at sudden noises. This wasn't a man comfortable in his own skin. I caught him as he was taking out his trash at dusk. "Officer Ramirez," I said quietly, stepping out from beside the dumpster. He startled, hand instinctively moving toward where his service weapon would be if he were on duty. "Who the hell are you?" His voice shook slightly. "My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I know about Carlson and Mendez." His face drained of color. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." I stepped closer, keeping my hands visible. "My 17-year-old daughter was beaten during a traffic stop last week. She wasn't the first, was she?" Ramirez's eyes darted around the parking lot. "Look, man, I can't talk about this. Not here." "Then where?" He hesitated, then said, "There's a diner on Westfield. Stays open all night. Back booth. 1 hour." I nodded and melted back into the shadows. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. I chose the booth furthest from the door, my back to the wall, full view of the entrance. Old habits. I ordered coffee and waited. Ramirez showed up 20 minutes late, looking like he'd aged years since our brief encounter. He slid into the booth across from me, hands trembling slightly as he picked up a menu he clearly had no intention of reading. "You followed me," he said accusingly. "Yes." "Are you a reporter?" "A lawyer." "I'm a father," I replied, my voice level. "My daughter came home with a split lip and cracked ribs because your colleagues decided to have some fun." Ramirez winced. "I wasn't there that night. But you know what happened. You know what they do." He set the menu down, finally meeting my eyes. "What do you want from me?" "The truth, evidence, justice." A waitress approached and Ramirez ordered coffee, waiting until she was out of earshot before speaking again. "You don't understand what you're asking. These guys, they're protected. The captain, the union rep, half the detectives, they all look the other way. Anyone who speaks up disappears. Not literally, but..." He made a vague gesture. "Transfers, desk duty. Suddenly your backup is always late when you call for it." "So you stay quiet and let them hurt kids?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but intense. "My daughter said they were laughing, Ramirez. Laughing while they hit her." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "I requested a transfer," he said defensively. "I got away from them, but not far enough to forget what you saw." The waitress returned with his coffee. Ramirez wrapped his hands around the mug, staring into it like it held answers. "How many?" I asked when we were alone again. "What? How many kids have they hurt?" He closed his eyes briefly. "I don't know. Dozens, maybe. They target teenagers, mostly minorities. Kids who won't report it, or won't be believed if they do." My stomach twisted. "And you've known all this time. What was I supposed to do?" His voice rose slightly before he caught himself. "I tried going to internal affairs once. The next day, my lieutenant called me in, showed me the complaint I'd filed. Said if I ever tried something like that again, they'd find drugs in my locker." I studied him for a long moment. There was fear in his eyes, yes, but something else too. Shame, guilt, the look of a man who'd compromised himself too many times. "Help me stop them," I said. Ramirez laughed bitterly. "How? You got an army I don't know about?" "I've got evidence. Partial evidence. Enough to start something, but not enough to finish it. I need someone on the inside." Understanding dawned on his face. "You want me to wear a wire?" I nodded. "That's suicide," he whispered. "It's redemption," I countered. For the next 3 hours we talked. I told him about Layla, about the pattern we'd uncovered, about the deleted footage Theo had recovered. He told me about the first time he'd witnessed Mendez plant evidence on a teenager, about how he'd thrown up in the bathroom afterward, about how they'd slowly drawn him in until he was complicit through his silence. "I never touched those kids," he insisted, eyes wet. "I never laid a hand on them, but I didn't stop it either." "You can stop it now," I said. Dawn was breaking by the time we finished our 4th cup of coffee. Ramirez looked exhausted, hollowed out. "If I do this," he said finally, "I need guarantees. Protection. Legal cover. A way out afterward. I can't stay in this city." "You'll have it all," I promised. "I've got friends who can help, people who know how to make things happen." He studied me, really looked at me for the first time. "You're military, aren't you? Or were? Navy SEAL? Retired?" Something shifted in his expression. Maybe relief, maybe respect. "That explains a lot." "Will you do it?" I pressed. Ramirez took a deep breath. "On one condition, you take the lead on this. Whatever plan you've got, I follow your orders. I can't be the one making decisions. Not on this." I understood what he was asking. He needed the moral weight to rest on someone else's shoulders. He needed to be a soldier following commands, not the officer giving them. "Agreed," I said, extending my hand across the table. After a moment's hesitation, he shook it. "God help us both," Ramirez whispered. The second Ramirez left the diner, I called Theo. My hands were still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of finally getting someone on the inside. "We're a go," I said when he picked up. "Ramirez is in. You sure we can trust him?" Theo's voice was thick with sleep, but I could hear him shifting, probably already sitting up in bed. As sure as we can be about anyone in that precinct. I walked to my car, scanning the parking lot for any signs of surveillance. He's scared, but he's more scared of living with himself if he doesn't help. Fear's a hell of a motivator, Theo grunted. What's the timeline? We need to move fast. The auto-delete happens in 3 days. Shit. I heard rustling on his end like he was already getting dressed. That's cutting it close. It's all we've got. I slid into my car and started the engine. Ramirez says Mendez and Kovac meet every Thursday night to divide up their earnings. The word tasted foul in my mouth. We need to get them talking about Layla and the others. You thinking what I'm thinking? Theo asked. Bait. I pulled out of the parking lot, checking my mirrors twice. We need to make them think there's money to be made. Or money to be lost, Theo countered. Threat's always more motivating than opportunity. He was right. These cops weren't just corrupt, they were predators. They responded to fear, to dominance plays. We needed to speak their language. I'll call Shirley, I said. She can help us find the right location. By that afternoon, we had our plan. Shirley had connections to a foreclosed property on the outskirts of town, an old farmhouse that had been tied up in estate litigation for years. Remote enough for privacy, close enough to civilization that the cops wouldn't suspect a trap. My cousin's the executor, Shirley explained as she handed me the keys. Nobody's been out there in months. We gathered at Theo's apartment that evening, me, Theo, and Shirley, huddled around his kitchen table with takeout containers and floor plans spread between us. Ramirez had texted the officers' schedules and patrol routes, giving us a perfect window the following night. We'll need to wire the whole place, Theo said, circling areas on the blueprint. Audio in every room, video covering all entrances and the main meeting area. What about Ramirez? Shirley asked. How do we keep him safe? He'll be wearing one of these. Theo pulled out what looked like an ordinary cell phone. Microphone, GPS tracker, and panic button all in one. Plus, I'll be in a van nearby, monitoring everything. I nodded. And I'll be inside with Ramirez. If things go south, I can intervene. Shirley frowned. These men hurt your daughter, and they've seen your face at the precinct. You can't be in that room. I'll be in the house, not the room, I clarified. Hidden, but close enough to step in if needed. We spent hours refining the details. The story would be simple. Ramirez had information about a teenager with wealthy parents who might pay to make charges disappear. He'd hint that he wanted in on their operation, that he was tired of watching from the sidelines while they got rich. Once they start talking, we need them to incriminate themselves clearly, I explained. Names, dates, specific incidents, enough that even their union lawyers can't wiggle them out. And the FBI? Shirley asked. I hesitated. I've got a contact, someone who owes me from back in my service days. He's agreed to be on standby, but he can't officially move until we have concrete evidence. So we're on our own until then, Theo said, not looking surprised. We've operated with less backup before, I reminded him. He grinned slightly. Yeah, but we had better weapons. Speak for yourself. Shirley patted her oversized purse with a wink. Despite everything, I felt a laugh bubble up. It died quickly when I thought of Layla's bruised face, but for a moment, I remembered what it felt like to have a team I trusted completely. The next morning, we arrived at the farmhouse before dawn. The place was perfect, isolated enough that no one would hear anything, but with good sight lines in all directions. No neighbors to get curious, no passing traffic to complicate things. Theo went to work immediately, setting up his equipment with the same methodical precision I remembered from our missions. Wireless cameras in the eaves, microphones hidden in light fixtures, backup recorders tucked into air vents. These are military grade, he explained as he handed me a tiny earpiece. You'll be able to hear everything from the basement, and I'll be in your ear the whole time. I nodded, slipping it in to test. How's the signal to the van? Crystal clear. I've got redundant systems in place. Even if one fails, we'll still get everything. While Theo finished the technical setup, I walked the property, mapping escape routes and identifying potential danger zones. Old habits. My SEAL training had never really left me. The constant assessment, the planning for worst-case scenarios. By afternoon, we were ready. I called my FBI contact one last time to confirm he'd be standing by, then texted Ramirez the final details. The meeting was set for 10 p.m. As the sun began to set, a strange calm settled over me. I'd felt it before missions, that peculiar stillness that comes when all the planning is done and all that remains is execution. Shirley arrived around 8 with food none of us would eat and updates from her precinct sources. "They're definitely interested," she said. "Ramirez told them he had a line on a rich kid with a DUI who's desperate to keep it quiet. Mentioned a potential 5-figure payoff." "And they bought it?" I asked. "Hook, line, and sinker." She sat beside me on the porch steps. "These aren't criminal masterminds, honey. They're bullies with badges." At 9, Theo left to position the surveillance van half a mile down the road. At 9:30, I took my place in the basement, directly beneath the room where the meeting would happen. I could hear everything through the old heating vents, and Theo's cameras gave me a perfect view on my tablet. My hands shook slightly as I set the final camera in place, a pinhole lens aimed at the kitchen table where the officers would sit. Not from fear, but from the weight of what we were about to do. If we succeeded, we'd bring down corrupt cops who had hurt countless kids, including my daughter. If we failed. I thought of Layla's face in the ambulance. The split lip, the bruised eye, the way she'd whispered, "They were laughing, Dad." My hands steadied. At 9:55, Ramirez's car pulled into the driveway. 5 minutes later, another vehicle arrived, an unmarked sedan with 2 men inside. "They're here," Theo's voice came through my earpiece. "Game time." I took a deep breath and touched the gun at my waistband, just in case. "Let's finish this." After everything was said at the abandoned property, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something. The officers hadn't seen Layla since the hospital. If they were coming after me, they might go after her next. The thought sent ice through my veins. "We need to move Layla," I told Theo through my earpiece. "Right now." "Already on it," he replied. "Shirley called me while you were setting up. They're packing essentials as we speak." Relief washed over me, but only briefly. "Where are they going?" "My place out in the county. It's got a bunker, something I built after I left service. Paranoia has its perks." I almost smiled. "How secure?" "Concrete walls, independent power, air filtration, and enough supplies for a month. Plus it's off all records. Not even my mail goes there." "Good, I'll meet them there after we finish the setup here." I checked my watch, 4 hours until the meeting. Enough time to get Layla settled and return before the officers arrived. The drive to Theo's property took 40 minutes. 35 of those on main roads, the last 5 on a dirt path that wound through dense woods. No street signs, no mailbox, nothing to indicate anyone lived there. Just the way Theo liked it. The house itself was modest, a single-story cabin with solar panels on the roof and a generator humming quietly in the back. Nothing about it screamed, "former special ops," which was exactly the point. Shirley's car was already parked behind the house, hidden from the road. I pulled up beside it and cut the engine, scanning the tree line out of habit before getting out. Theo had given me the entry code. I punched it in and heard the solid click of the door unlocking. Inside, the cabin was sparse but comfortable. A living room with a worn couch, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms visible down a short hallway. "Hello?" I called out. Shirley appeared from one of the bedrooms. "We're here, just getting her settled." My chest tightened. "How is she?" "Scared, trying not to show it." Shirley gave me a knowing look, like her father. I moved past her to the bedroom. Layla sat on the edge of a twin bed, her overnight bag beside her. She looked up when I entered, and despite the fading bruises on her face, she managed a small smile. "Hey, Dad." I crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug, careful of her injuries. She felt so small in my arms, my little girl who wasn't so little anymore. 17 years old and facing things no teenager should ever have to face. "I'm sorry about all this," I said, pulling back to look at her. She shook her head. "Don't be, it's not your fault." It's not yours either, I said firmly. None of this is… Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. What's happening now? Miss Shirley wouldn't tell me much, just that we needed to hide. I sat beside her on the bed. We're setting a trap for the officers who hurt you. We have evidence they've been doing this to other kids too, blackmailing them, threatening them. Like they threatened you? Her voice was small. Yes. No point in lying to her. But we're going to stop them. Tonight? How? I explained the basics, the sting operation, the recordings we planned to make, the FBI contact waiting for our evidence. I left out the more dangerous details, the contingency plans in case things went wrong. I need you to trust me, I said, holding her gaze. Can you do that? She nodded without hesitation. Always. I squeezed her hand, then stood. There's one more thing. Theo has a special room here, a safe room. You and Shirley will stay there until this is over. A bunker? She raised an eyebrow. Your friend is that paranoid? In our line of work, it wasn't paranoia, I said with a half smile. It was preparation. Shirley appeared in the doorway. It's time to show her the room, then you need to get back. I checked my watch. She was right. The entrance to the bunker was hidden beneath a trapdoor in the pantry, concealed under a rug and a shelf of canned goods. I helped Shirley move everything aside, then entered the code on a small keypad. The trapdoor unlocked with a soft click. Ladies first, I said, lifting the heavy door. A set of steel stairs led down into darkness. I flipped a switch, and lights flickered on, revealing a room about 15 feet square. The walls were solid concrete, the ceiling reinforced with steel beams. A pair of cots stood against one wall, a small bathroom behind a partition, and shelves of supplies lined another wall. In the center was a table with chairs and, most importantly, a bank of monitors. Theo has the whole system wired to feed directly here, I explained as we descended. You'll be able to see everything that happens at the farmhouse. Layla looked around, taking it all in. How long will we be down here? Just until it's over, I promised. A day at most. I showed them how to operate the security system, the communication equipment, and the monitors. Theo had already set everything up to receive the live feed from the farmhouse cameras. If anything goes wrong, anything at all, there's a direct line to my FBI contact, I said, pointing to a red phone on the wall. One button, that's it. Shirley nodded, her expression grim but determined. We'll be fine. You just focus on getting those bastards. I checked my watch again. Time was running out. I have to go, I said. Layla grabbed my arm. Dad? I pulled her into another hug, holding her tightly. Trust me, I whispered. I'll be back before you know it. When I pulled away, her eyes were wet, but she nodded bravely. Be careful. Always am. I climbed back up the stairs, my heart heavy with the weight of leaving her. At the top, I paused to look back down. Layla had already moved to the monitors, watching as they flickered to life with images of the empty farmhouse. Shirley stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. He's going to be okay, I heard Shirley tell her as I began to close the trapdoor. He's done this before. The last thing I saw was Layla gripping Shirley's hand, her eyes fixed on the screen, watching and waiting for what would unfold. The farmhouse looked peaceful in the moonlight. I crouched in shadows 20 yards away, motionless except for my scanning eyes. All systems green, Theo said through my earpiece. I tapped once to acknowledge. Waiting was hardest. I'd spent nights hidden in worse places than this Virginia farm. But this was for Layla, my daughter. Headlights appeared as Ramirez arrived with the duffel bag, pacing nervously. Ramirez is on site, Theo confirmed. Another vehicle approached, an unmarked cruiser. Officers Wilson and Brenner emerged, the men who beat my daughter. Cold detachment washed over me as my heart slowed. Wilson swaggered toward Ramirez while Brenner scanned the area. You brought it? Wilson's voice came through my earpiece. 20,000 like you asked. Ramirez showed the FBI marked cash. What, you think we don't trust you? I just want this over, Ramirez said. This thing with the SEAL's daughter, it's gotten out of hand. That uppity bitch got what was coming to her, Wilson snorted. Like all the others? Ramirez probed. They boasted about disabling body cameras, threatening victims, planting drugs, and having judges in their pocket. They mentioned the Jenkins case and casually dismissed Melissa Winter's overdose. This operation's been running smooth for 3 years, Wilson bragged. And if someone talks, Ramirez asked. Then they have accidents, Wilson said coldly. But most people value their kneecaps. They left with the money unaware their confessions were recorded. I tapped twice to signal Theo. FBI is moving in, he confirmed. I remained still, knowing justice would come from their own words. And across town, Layla would know the men who hurt her would never hurt anyone again. I waited in the shadows, the familiar calm of combat settling over me. Years of SEAL operations had trained my body to enter this state. Heart rate steady, breathing controlled, mind razor sharp. This wasn't Iraq or Afghanistan, but the stakes felt just as high, maybe higher. This was for Layla. We've got what we need, Theo's voice crackled in my earpiece. FBI team is 3 minutes out. No, I whispered back. We finish this my way. I didn't want these men handed off to uniforms who never knew Layla's tears, who never sat beside her hospital bed counting bruises, who never felt her trembling hands as nightmares jolted her awake. I stepped out from behind the abandoned machinery, my boots crunching deliberately on the gravel. The sound cut through the night like a gunshot. Wilson and Brenner froze halfway to their car, heads snapping toward me in perfect synchronization. Ramirez wisely stepped back, hands slightly raised to stay clear of what was coming. "Evening, officers," I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. Recognition dawned on their faces. Wilson recovered first, his hand instinctively moving toward his holster. "You," he spat. "The hell are you doing here?" "Just came to thank you personally," I replied, continuing my slow approach. "For what you did to my daughter." Brenner's eyes darted between me and Ramirez, the pieces clicking into place. "You son of a bitch," he growled at Ramirez. "You set us up?" I kept walking forward, measuring each step. 20 feet. 15. "Stay back," Wilson shouted, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion, but I'd been watching men draw guns since before he had his badge. I was already moving, closing the distance with the explosive burst speed that had kept me alive in war zones across the world. Wilson got the gun up, but not in time. My left hand shot out, gripping his wrist and twisting hard while my right palm drove upward into his elbow joint. The sickening pop was followed by his howl as the weapon clattered to the ground. I continued the motion, using his own momentum to flip him over my hip. A textbook disarm and drop we'd drilled 1,000 times in training. He hit the ground hard, the air rushing from his lungs in a pained whoosh. Before he could recover, I had his arms pinned behind him, my knee pressing firmly between his shoulder blades. "That's for laughing while you hit her," I said quietly. Brenner was already running, his heavy footfalls pounding across the gravel lot toward the fence line. Ramirez moved to intercept, but I called out, "I've got him!" I zip-tied Wilson's wrists with the plastic restraints I'd kept in my pocket, cinching them tight enough to hurt. Then I was up and moving, my body remembering speeds I hadn't called upon in years. Brenner was younger, but fear makes for sloppy movement. He zigzagged, looking back over his shoulder instead of focusing on his escape. Rookie mistake. I closed the gap in seconds, launching into a flying tackle that caught him at the knees. We went down hard, rolling in the dirt. He was strong, throwing wild punches that might have done damage if they'd connected. But I slipped inside his guard, the muscle memory of close quarters combat taking over. One sharp strike to the solar plexus collapsed him forward. As he doubled over, gasping, I locked my arm around his neck in a sleeper hold, not crushing his windpipe, just cutting off blood flow to the brain. He struggled, fingers clawing at my forearm, but I maintained the precise pressure. "You won't hurt anyone else's daughter," I whispered as his struggles weakened. His body went limp within seconds. I eased him to the ground, zip-tied his wrists, and checked his pulse. Strong and steady. He'd wake up with a headache, but in a cell where he belonged. By the time I walked back to the meeting point, the first FBI vehicles were rolling in, lights flashing, but sirens silent. Ramirez stood with his hands visible, Wilson still face down and cursing beside him. "Jesus Christ," the lead FBI agent said, taking in the scene. "You weren't supposed to engage them." "They were armed and attempting to flee," I replied evenly. "I detained them using appropriate force until authorities arrived." The agent looked skeptical but nodded. "Where's the other one?" I gestured toward Brenner's unconscious form. "Sleeping it off over there." As the agents moved to secure the scene, I caught Ramirez's eye. He gave me a small nod of respect. "You moved like..." he started. "Like someone who's done this before," I finished for him. The FBI team swarmed around us, collecting evidence, retrieving the recording devices, securing the prisoners. I stood back, suddenly feeling the ache in muscles I hadn't pushed that hard in years. But it was a good ache, a necessary one. An agent approached me with a tablet. "We've got it all. The confessions, the names, everything. This isn't just about your daughter anymore. We're looking at a corruption case that could take down half the precinct." I nodded, watching as they loaded Wilson and the now conscious Brenner into separate vehicles. Both men glared at me with pure hatred as they passed. I met their eyes without flinching. "It's over," the agent said. But I knew better. This was just the beginning. I stood in my kitchen the next morning, coffee mug warming my hands as the TV flickered with breaking news. My body ached in places I'd forgotten could hurt. Souvenirs from last night's takedown. Worth every twinge. "We're interrupting regular programming to bring you this developing story," the anchor announced, her expression serious. 2 local police officers have been arrested in what authorities are calling a shocking assault ring targeting young drivers in our community. The screen cut to footage of Wilson and Brenner being led into the federal building, hands cuffed behind their backs, heads ducked to avoid the cameras. I felt nothing watching them shuffle along in orange jumpsuits. No satisfaction, no relief, just a hollow emptiness where my rage had lived for the past week. I heard soft footsteps behind me and turned to see Layla padding into the kitchen. She'd been staying at my place since we'd left Shirley's safe room last night. Her bruises had faded to yellowish shadows, but something in her eyes still looked wounded. She wore her mother's old Northwestern sweatshirt that swallowed her slender frame. "Morning, Dad," she said quietly, reaching for a mug from the cabinet. "Hey, sweetheart. Sleep okay?" She nodded, pouring herself coffee before settling onto a stool at the counter. Her eyes drifted to the television, where the anchor was now standing outside the police station. Officers James Wilson and Michael Brenner face multiple charges including assault, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and conspiracy, the reporter continued. Sources tell us the investigation began after the violent assault of a teenage girl during a routine traffic stop last week. Layla's fingers tightened around her mug. I reached for the remote, but she shook her head. "It's okay. I want to hear." The screen changed to show the police chief at a hastily arranged press conference, looking appropriately grave and outraged. "These allegations represent a profound betrayal of public trust. I want to assure our community that this behavior is not representative of our department, and we are cooperating fully with federal investigators." Pure damage control. The same chief who'd brushed me off when I'd tried to file a complaint. I swallowed a bitter comment, not wanting to darken Layla's morning further. "According to court documents unsealed this morning," the anchor continued, "the officers operated a systematic intimidation scheme targeting primarily young minority drivers. The FBI reports that dozens of victims have already come forward since the arrests." The report cut to footage of the abandoned property where we'd conducted the sting. Yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze. I recognized the FBI agent I'd spoken with, now addressing a cluster of microphones. "This investigation uncovered a pattern of abuse spanning at least 3 years," she explained. "Thanks to the bravery of a concerned father and the cooperation of witnesses within the department, we were able to gather compelling evidence leading to these arrests." Layla reached for the remote and turned the volume down. "I don't need them to know," she whispered, staring into her coffee. "I just need them gone." I moved around the counter and sat beside her. "No one will mention your name unless you want them to." She nodded, relief visible in the loosening of her shoulders. Those other kids they hurt. Do you think they'll be okay now? I hope so, I said honestly. Knowing the people who hurt you can't hurt anyone else. That helps. Not right away, but eventually. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was Theo. Turning into a media circus, you guys okay? I typed back a quick, "We're good," before setting the phone down. The news had moved on to interviewing a legal expert about potential sentences. Given the severity of the charges and the evidence reportedly obtained through wire recordings, these officers could face significant prison time, the expert was saying. The conspiracy and civil rights violation charges alone carry. Layla sipped her coffee, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not satisfaction exactly, more like quiet assessment. What happens now? She asked, turning to me. There'll be arraignments, probably bail hearings, though I doubt they'll get it. Then pretrial motions, maybe plea negotiations. I paused. You might need to testify eventually, but we'll cross that bridge if we come to it. She nodded, digesting this. And what about us? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, she set her mug down carefully. We haven't really talked about what happens after, with us. I realized then what she was really asking. For the past week, I'd been operator, mission commander, avenger, roles I'd slipped back into with disturbing ease, roles that had no place in our normal life. We go back to being us, I said simply. I help you finish your college applications. You roll your eyes when I try to talk about boys. I pretend not to notice when you stay up too late reading. We figure out what to do with that broken dishwasher. A small smile tugged at her lips. Sounds boring. Boring sounds pretty good right now, don't you think? She nodded, then surprised me by leaning her head against my shoulder. Thanks, Dad. On the television, they showed Wilson and Brenner again, their faces twisted in scowls as they were led away. Layla watched them for a moment, then reached for the remote and switched the TV off completely. I just need them gone, she repeated more firmly this time. Then she stood, taking her coffee with her. I think I'll finish that essay for Northwestern today. The news coverage faded from the headlines by day 3. Life has a way of rolling on, even after something shatters your world. The media moved on to other stories, but Layla and I were still piecing things back together. I noticed it first when we drove to her follow-up doctor's appointment. A police cruiser pulled alongside us at a red light, and her entire body went rigid. Her breathing quickened, and her eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to even acknowledge the car beside us. It's okay, I said softly. They're not them. She nodded but didn't speak until we were 2 miles past that intersection. That night I heard her pacing in her bedroom. The floorboards creaked in that familiar pattern. 3 steps, pause, turn, 3 steps back. The same way her mother used to walk when something troubled her. I knocked gently on her door. Can't sleep? I asked. She shook her head, hugging herself. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. I feel the handcuffs. I hear them laughing. I sat on the edge of her bed, feeling utterly inadequate. In the SEALs, we had protocols for everything: extraction plans, medical procedures, communication breakdowns. But there was no field manual for helping your daughter recover from something like this. When I came back from my second deployment, I said carefully, I couldn't sleep for weeks. Kept hearing sounds that weren't there. She sat beside me. What did you do? I talked to people. Not everyone. Just the ones who'd understand. And I didn't try to outrun it. I let myself feel it, then practiced being in the world again, little by little. The next morning I suggested we take a short drive, just around the block. She hesitated at the front door, keys dangling from her fingers. I don't have to drive, she said. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, I told her. But the longer you wait, the bigger it gets. She took a deep breath and walked to the car. I slid into the passenger seat, trying to look more relaxed than I felt. She adjusted the mirrors 3 times before starting the engine. We made it halfway around the block before a siren wailed in the distance. Her hands jerked on the wheel and she pulled over immediately, breathing hard. I can't, she whispered. I keep thinking they're coming for me again. I reached across and put my hand over hers. That's okay. We'll try again tomorrow. And we did. The next day, we made it around the entire block. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and she checked the rearview mirror every few seconds, but we completed the circuit. When we pulled back into our driveway, she let out a long, shaky breath. That wasn't so bad, she said, though we both knew it had been. On the third day, we drove to the end of our street and back. On the fourth, we ventured into the neighborhood beyond ours. Each time I watched her hands on the wheel, still trembling, but less with each trip. She began to talk more during these drives, first about neutral things like school and her friends, then gradually about that night. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, she said during our fourth drive. Nothing, I said firmly. You did nothing wrong. I know that here, she tapped her head, but not here. She placed her hand over her heart. I understood that disconnect all too well. On the fifth day, we'd just completed our now familiar route when she surprised me by taking a different turn. Where are we going? I asked. I don't know, she said, her voice steadier than it had been all week. I need to go further today. She gripped the wheel firmly, her chin lifted slightly in that determined way that always reminded me of her mother. We drove past the school, past the mall where she used to hang out with friends, past all the familiar landmarks of her interrupted teenage life. When we reached the city limits, she pulled into a scenic overlook and parked. For a long moment, we sat in silence, looking out over the valley where our town nestled. I used to think I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged, she said finally. Now everything feels different. Different doesn't mean worse, I offered. Sometimes it just means you see things more clearly. She nodded slowly. I'm not going to let them take anything else from me. The steel in her voice made my throat tighten. My little girl wasn't so little anymore. The trauma had changed her, hardened some parts, made other parts more vulnerable, but it hadn't broken her. Let's go further tomorrow, she said, turning to me with something like her old smile. Not quite there yet, but closer. Maybe all the way to the lake? Wherever you want to go, I promised. As we drove home, I noticed she checked the rearview mirror only twice. Her hands remained steady on the wheel, even when we passed a police car parked on the shoulder. She didn't flinch at the sight of the uniform, didn't speed up nervously. She simply drove past, eyes focused on the road ahead. Small steps. That's how healing works, not in dramatic leaps, but in quiet moments of reclaimed courage. Watching her navigate that car down familiar streets, I felt a fierce pride that eclipsed even the anger I'd carried since that night. They had hurt her, but they hadn't defined her. She was finding her way back to herself 1 mile at a time. A week into our driving sessions, I watched Layla's hands on the steering wheel. The trembling had mostly subsided, replaced by a quiet determination that made my chest swell with pride. She still checked the mirrors more than necessary, but her breathing remained steady even when we passed police cruisers. I think I'm ready to drive alone soon, she said as we pulled back into our driveway after completing our longest route yet. The words hit me like a physical blow. Logically, I knew this was progress, exactly what we'd been working toward. But emotionally, the thought of her alone in a car, vulnerable to being pulled over again, made my stomach clench. Maybe, I said carefully. Let's not rush it. She cut the engine and turned to face me. Dad, you can't protect me forever. Watch me try, I muttered, only half joking. She rolled her eyes, but I caught the hint of a smile. That small gesture, so normal, so teenage, felt like a victory. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the hallway outside Layla's room, listening to her even breathing through the partially open door. The moon cast long shadows across the carpet, and in those shadows, I saw the faces of the men who had hurt her. The rage I thought I'd put to rest flared up again, hot and demanding. But this wasn't about vengeance anymore. The corrupt officers were facing justice. Their careers were over. Their freedom would soon follow. What kept me awake now was something more primal, the need to keep my daughter safe in a world that had already proven itself dangerous. I retreated to my bedroom and opened the top drawer of my dresser. Beneath a stack of folded t-shirts lay a small wooden box. I hadn't opened it in years, but my fingers remembered the feel of it. Smooth oak, worn at the corners from being carried through 3 continents. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded blue velvet, was my Navy SEAL pin. The golden eagle clutched a trident, anchor, and pistol, symbols of air, sea, and land. The eagle's eyes seemed to catch the moonlight as I lifted it out. I'd earned this pin through blood and grit, through training that broke men in half and rebuilt them stronger. I'd carried it through firefights and night missions, through sandstorms and ocean drops. It had been with me on the day I met Catherine, Layla's mother, and on the day we buried her. Superstitious nonsense, my commanding officer had called it when he caught me touching the pin before missions. But I'd never gone into danger without it, and I'd never failed to come home. I closed my fingers around it, feeling the sharp edges press into my palm. Tomorrow, Layla would ask to drive alone again, and tomorrow I would have to let her. Morning came too quickly. We ate breakfast in comfortable silence, another small return to normalcy, before Layla grabbed the car keys. "Short drive today?" she asked, her voice casual but her eyes watchful. I nodded, swallowing the protest that rose instinctively. "Wherever you want to go." We settled into the car, and I noticed how confidently she adjusted the seat, checked the mirrors, buckled her seatbelt. Small actions that had been automatic before the assault, then terrifying in its aftermath, were becoming routine again. As she started the engine, I made my decision. "Hold on a second," I said. She looked at me, eyebrows raised in question. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the SEAL pin. In the morning sunlight, it gleamed gold and silver against my weathered palm. "What's that?" she asked, leaning closer. "Something that kept me alive through a lot of dark places," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Your SEAL pin? You always kept it in that box in your drawer." I nodded, surprised she remembered. "I carried this through every mission, never went into danger without it." "Mom used to say it was your good luck charm," she said softly. The mention of Catherine made my throat tighten. Yeah, she did. I reached over and opened the glove compartment. Deliberately, I placed the pin inside, positioning it where it would catch the light whenever the compartment was opened. "Dad?" Layla's voice held a question. "It's yours now," I said simply. "But..." She looked from the pin to me, her eyes wide. "You always said it kept you alive." I met her gaze steadily. "Now it keeps you strong." She reached out, her fingers hovering over the pin without touching it. "I can't take this from you." "You're not taking it," I corrected her. "I'm giving it to you. There's a difference." She closed the glove compartment gently, as if the pin might break under too much pressure. Then she looked up at me, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The pin had been a part of me for so long that giving it away felt like surrendering a piece of myself. But wasn't that what parenthood was? Giving pieces of yourself until your child had everything they needed to face the world alone? Layla started the car again and backed carefully out of the driveway. As we pulled onto the street, the morning sun broke through a bank of clouds, washing the neighborhood in golden light. The warmth spilled through the windshield, touching Layla's face, illuminating the quiet strength I'd always known was there. I returned to the abandoned property 5 days after the sting. The sky hung gray and threatening, matching my mood. Not dark, not light, just waiting. I parked my truck a quarter-mile away out of habit, though there was no need for stealth now. The walk gave me time to think. The dirt path crunched under my boots, each step stirring memories of that night. The tension in my shoulders as I'd installed the cameras. The taste of copper in my mouth as I'd waited, hidden, listening to those officers brag about hurting my daughter. The cold precision that had taken over when I finally moved. I reached the clearing where the dilapidated house stood. Yellow police tape still fluttered from several points, dancing in the breeze like victory pennants. I ducked under one and pushed open the creaking door. Inside, dust motes swirled in shafts of weak light filtering through broken windows. The place smelled of mold and disuse, with an undertone of something else: gun oil, sweat, fear, the scent of confrontation. Just gear retrieval, I muttered to myself, in and out. Theo had insisted I wait until today to collect the remaining surveillance equipment. "Let the dust settle," he'd said. "Make sure nobody's watching the place." Smart man, Theodore. Always thinking 3 steps ahead. That's why we'd survived so many ops together. I moved to the first camera location hidden in a light fixture. The tiny device was nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I reached up and detached it with practiced fingers, slipping it into the padded case I'd brought. As I worked, my mind drifted back to Layla. This morning, she'd driven herself to school for the first time since the assault. I'd stood in the driveway trying to look casual, while my heart hammered against my ribs. When she'd pulled away, I'd noticed her hand drift to the glove compartment, touching it briefly, like a talisman. The second camera came free with a soft click. I coiled its wire carefully, the way I'd been taught decades ago. Always treat your equipment with respect. It might save your life someday. That camera had captured the moment one of the cops had reached for his weapon. The footage showed my response, a blur of movement ending with the officer face down, arm twisted behind his back. The FBI agent had whistled when he reviewed that part. "Remind me never to piss you off," he'd said. I hadn't bothered to respond. Some things you can't explain to people who haven't lived them. The third camera was wedged behind a rotting baseboard. As I knelt to retrieve it, my knee landed on the exact spot where I'd pinned the second officer. I paused, palm flat against the warped floorboards. In that moment, I'd been pure instinct and training, a weapon pointed at a target. "Was it worth it?" I asked the empty room. The silence answered, "Yes." I collected 2 more devices from the walls, then headed upstairs for the last one. The steps groaned under my weight, announcing my presence to ghosts. Upstairs, light spilled through a hole in the roof, illuminating dust and debris. I'd positioned the final camera here for its overhead view of the entire operation. As I reached for it, something caught my eye. A scrap of paper caught between floorboards. I pried it loose and unfolded it carefully. It was a receipt from a gas station, dated the night of the assault. One of the officers perhaps dropped during the struggle. I stared at it, this mundane evidence of ordinary life. These men had filled their cars with gas, bought coffee, gone about their day, then put their hands on my daughter and laughed while she cried. I crumpled the receipt and shoved it in my pocket. Evidence of nothing now. Just trash to be disposed of. With all 6 cameras collected, I did a final sweep of the property, ensuring I'd left no trace. Force of habit. In the SEAL teams, we'd been ghosts, appearing, completing the mission, vanishing. Leave nothing but footprints. Take nothing but memories. And sometimes, not even those. Outside, the gray sky had darkened. Rain wasn't far off. I stood in the yard looking back at the house. A week ago, it had been just another abandoned property. Then, for one night, it had become an arena of justice. Now it was returning to anonymity, its brief importance already fading. I shouldered my bag of equipment and turned away. The mission was complete. Evidence secured, targets neutralized, victim safe. In my mind, I could almost hear the voice of my old commander. Mission parameters achieved. Extraction complete. But unlike those old missions, this one had no extraction point, no helicopter waiting to carry us to safety. The battle might be over, but we still lived in the war zone. Layla would still flinch at the sound of sirens. I would still scan every room for threats. Some habits never die. The first drops of rain began to fall as I walked back to my truck. They tapped against my shoulders, cool and cleansing. By the time I reached the vehicle, the shower had intensified, washing away my footprints on the dirt path. I placed the equipment bag carefully in the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, listening to rain drum against the roof. The sound was soothing, almost meditative. For the first time in days, my shoulders relaxed. This place was no longer a battleground, we had won here. I was watering the porch plants when Miss Shirley's ancient Buick pulled into my driveway 3 days after the arrests. The engine coughed twice before she cut it off. That car had been on its last legs for at least a decade now, but somehow kept rolling, kind of like Shirley herself. She emerged from the driver's side holding a glass baking dish wrapped in a checkered kitchen towel. Even from the porch, I could smell the sweet, buttery scent of her peach cobbler. "Don't just stand there with that watering can," she called. "Come help an old woman carry dessert." I set the can down and jogged over, taking the warm dish from her hands. "You didn't have to bring anything, Shirley." "I absolutely did," she countered, retrieving her purse from the passenger seat. "It's not a proper visit without food. That's rule number 1. "And what's rule number 2? I asked, falling into our familiar rhythm. "Always bring enough to leave leftovers." She patted my arm. "Your daddy taught me that one." We walked up to the porch together, her pace deliberately unhurried. Shirley had been my wife's best friend for 30 years, and after Marion passed, she'd appointed herself my unofficial guardian. Not that I needed looking after, but sometimes it was nice to be fussed over. "Layla at her study group?" she asked as we settled into the porch chairs. I nodded. "Until 8. She's catching up on the calculus she missed." "That girl," Shirley smiled, shaking her head. 2 weeks after everything and she's worried about math." "That's Layla," I agreed, setting the cobbler on the small table between us. "Wants to finish the semester strong." The evening air was warm but not oppressive. A gentle breeze carried the scent of the gardenias Marion had planted years ago. They were in full bloom now, their white flowers stark against dark green leaves. "How is she really doing?" Shirley asked, her voice softer now. I considered the question, wanting to be honest. "Better. Some days are harder than others. She still checks the locks twice, still startles at loud noises. And the nightmares? Less frequent." I looked out across the yard, watching as the setting sun cast long shadows. "Last night was good. First time in a while." Shirley nodded, satisfied. "And what about you?" I gave her a small smile. "I'm fine." She hummed, clearly unconvinced. "That's why you've got circles under your eyes, dark as my coffee." "I'm sleeping enough." "Sleeping and resting aren't the same thing." She leaned forward. "Your body might be still, but that mind of yours is running tactical drills 24/7. I couldn't argue with that. Even now, with the threat neutralized, I found myself planning contingencies, escape routes, defensive positions, old habits from my SEAL days, reactivated by fear. "I'll rest when I know she's okay," I said simply. Shirley reached over and patted my hand. "She's getting there, you both are." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sky turned from blue to pink to deep orange. The temperature dropped slightly, bringing with it the earthy smell of cooling soil. "Marion would be proud, you know," Shirley said suddenly. I turned to look at her. "Of Layla? Of both of you?" She adjusted her glasses, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she was gathering her thoughts. "But especially you." Something in my chest tightened. "I don't know about that. I nearly lost it, Shirley. Nearly crossed lines I swore I never would." "But you didn't," she pointed out. "You found another way, a better way." I wanted to hurt them, I admitted, the words tasting bitter. Really hurt them. "Of course you did. You're human." Shirley's voice was matter-of-fact. "But you channeled that rage into justice instead of vengeance. That's what Marion would be proud of." I looked down at my hands, remembering how they'd trembled with restrained fury that night at the abandoned house. How close I'd come to giving in to the darkness. "You know what Marion told me once?" Shirley continued. "It was right after you came back from that bad deployment, the one you never talk about. She said, 'My husband carries the weight of terrible choices, but he always chooses light when he can.' My throat felt suddenly tight. Marion had always seen me more clearly than I saw myself. "Layla's your girl through and through," Shirley said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Got your strength, your focus, but she's got Marion's heart. That combination's going to take her far." The sun was nearly gone now, just a sliver of gold on the horizon. In the growing darkness, I could see fireflies beginning to blink in the yard. Nature's own surveillance system, I thought wryly. I miss her, I said quietly. Shirley didn't pretend to misunderstand. I know. Me too. Every day. Sometimes I hear her voice so clearly when I'm trying to figure out what to do with Layla, how to help her. And what does she say? I smiled slightly. Usually something sensible that I should have thought of myself. Shirley laughed, the sound warm and genuine. That sounds about right. She reached for the cobbler, unwrapping it with practiced hands. The sweet aroma intensified, bringing with it a rush of memories. Sunday dinners, birthday celebrations, quiet evenings just like this one. I didn't bring plates, she realized, frowning. I'll get some. I started to rise, but she waved me back down. In a minute, let's just sit a while longer. So we did, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. Not disappear, I wasn't sure it ever would completely, but loosen enough to breathe fully. I woke up earlier than usual that morning, something pulling me from sleep before my alarm even had a chance to buzz. The house was quiet, peaceful in that pre-dawn way that always reminded me of mission mornings. Only this wasn't a mission day. This was something more important. It was Layla's first day driving herself back to school. I made coffee and eggs, the routine movements anchoring me as sunlight gradually filled the kitchen. When I heard her footsteps on the stairs, I had everything ready. Food on the table, coffee in mugs, and my own nerves carefully tucked away where she couldn't see them. "Morning," she said, sliding into her chair. I studied her face, looking for signs of anxiety. Her eye had healed completely now, the swelling gone, though sometimes I still saw a phantom shadow there when I looked at her. But this morning her expression was calm, determined. "Sleep okay?" I asked, passing her the salt. "Yeah," she took a bite of eggs. "Woke up once but went right back to sleep." Progress. A month ago, those night terrors had kept her up for hours. "You sure you want to drive today?" I kept my tone casual. "I don't mind taking you." She shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Dad, we talked about this." I know. I raised my hands in surrender. "Just checking." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Through the window I could see the neighborhood coming to life. Sprinklers turning on, early joggers passing by, the paper delivery guy making his rounds. Normal life. We were part of it again. "Mr. Rodriguez called yesterday," Layla said, breaking into my thoughts. "He wants me to rejoin debate team." "Yeah? What did you tell him?" She shrugged, but I could see she was pleased. "Said I'd think about it." "That's your thing," I reminded her. "You were good at it." "I know." She pushed her plate away. "Just wasn't sure if I was ready to be visible again." I understood that feeling all too well. After certain missions, I'd wanted nothing more than to disappear, to be a ghost moving through the world unnoticed. But eventually, you had to step back into the light. "No rush," I said, "but when you're ready, that team could use you." She nodded, then glanced at her watch. "We should probably go soon." My heart did a little skip. "Right, let me grab my keys." "Dad?" She gave me a look that was pure Marion. "My keys, remember?" "Right," I said again, feeling slightly off balance. Force of habit. We cleared the table together, and I watched as she gathered her backpack, checked her phone, and slipped on her jacket. All the ordinary movements of a teenager heading to school. Except nothing about Layla would ever be ordinary to me. Every day she stood taller, spoke more confidently, reclaimed another piece of herself. It was like watching a flower unfold in time-lapse. Outside, the morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and someone's dryer exhaust, clean laundry, and new beginnings. Layla walked to the driver's side of her car, keys jingling in her hand. I headed for the passenger door, trying not to hover or check the tires or suggest she adjust her mirrors. The car interior smelled faintly of the vanilla air freshener Shirley had given her. Layla settled into the driver's seat, adjusted it forward slightly, and fastened her seatbelt. I did the same, noting how she checked all her mirrors without prompting, how her hands positioned perfectly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. "Ready?" she asked, glancing over at me. "All set." She started the engine, the car humming to life beneath us. For a moment, she just sat there, hands on the wheel, taking deep breaths. I wanted to say something reassuring, but held back. This was her moment to work through. Finally, she put the car in reverse, checked over her shoulder, and backed smoothly out of the driveway. Her movements were deliberate, cautious, but not fearful. As we pulled onto our street, I found myself instinctively reaching toward the glove compartment. "You checking for the pin?" Layla asked, eyes still on the road. I smiled. Of course she'd noticed. "Maybe. It's still there, Dad. I checked before I came downstairs." The knowledge warmed me. That small piece of metal, that symbol of everything I'd been and everything I'd fought for, had become important to her too. Not because she needed protection, though God knows I'd give my life for hers in a heartbeat, but because it connected us, past to present, strength to strength. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the familiar streets of our neighborhood giving way to busier roads. Layla handled each intersection with care, signaling early, checking blind spots. I found myself relaxing, my hand resting lightly on the closed glove compartment. As we approached the school, traffic thickened with buses and other student drivers. Layla navigated it all with steady focus. The morning sun streamed through the windshield, turning her profile to gold, highlighting the determined set of her jaw. So like mine, everyone said. "We okay?" she asked suddenly, glancing over at me as we waited at a red light. The question caught me off guard, simple words carrying the weight of everything we'd been through. I looked at my daughter, this extraordinary young woman who'd faced darkness and emerged stronger, and felt a surge of something beyond pride. I nodded. "We're better than okay." The light turned green. Layla accelerated smoothly, and we continued forward, the school now visible ahead. Around us, the day was opening up, bright and full. Around us, the day was opening up, bright and full of possibility. The road stretched out before us, clear and waiting.